I'm gonna start by asking you a really simple question.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I'm speaking to you, Greg, after I spoke to Larry, because it's one of the greatest rhythm sections of all time. I mean, you guys sort of taught us what a rhythm section can be. And I asked him a lot of questions, both technical and just broad about
Yeah.
the group. And I really want to get your feeling on some of these about some of these things. But the first thing, it's a simple question. At the beginning of the project,
Mhm.
in the Bay Area, when you all start to rehearse together, which I understand there was an unbelievable amount of rehearsal in the
We used to
beginning.
rehearse a lot. Yeah. Yeah, we
What
did.
kind of what word would you use to describe the music you were playing? Would you have said rock and roll? Would you have said the word funk? Would you have said the word pop? Would you have said rhythm and blues? What did you think you were playing?
We didn't identify that in the beginning. Uh, and we kind of stayed away from having to identify it, even more so after. We started the group in December of 1966.
Hmm.
And the first day we all met each other and got together, we didn't play. We talked. We were kind of like looking at each other and feeling the moment and thinking about the moment in time that we're in, what was going on socially. San Francisco has always been experimental and like anything goes, right?
Sure.
So we grew up in that vibe and that mindset. So this was, you know, it wasn't odd, but it was like exciting. It was challenging, but in an exciting way, in an
Yeah.
uplifting way, because we all had smiles on our face, like we're all checking each other out and stuff, and
Yeah.
talking about what we're going to do. So the initial intent was to do uh, the end game was that we were going to do new music, you know,
Yeah.
but to go out and start gigging in the clubs and whatever, we knew that we had to do top 40, what everybody's familiar with.
Hmm.
But when we took those songs and picked them, we were going to make them our own in the presentation and the performance of them. We're going to take the song, rearrange it, in a new way, and make it our own and do it in whatever that style was going to be, because we didn't know yet, right? But
Right.
we felt that. We knew that was, yeah, we're going to do
And
that.
Greg, how old were you at that first meeting?
I was 17 and a half. I can tell you what I am. I was born in 48, so
So like
do math, you know my age.
I know that Jerry was a little older, and I
Yeah,
mean,
he was the oldest one, actually. He was a year older than Sly, then it was the Jerry, Sly, then Larry, Freddie, Rose, Cynthia, and then myself. I
you're the
was
baby.
17 and a half.
You were the baby of the group.
I was the
Uh,
baby.
had you ever toured? Had you ever played outside of the Bay Area before?
At that point,
At that point?
oh no, I I started playing when I was 14. I got my first drum set, and I wasn't playing before. I wanted to play, but I've told this story a million times. My folks didn't want all that noise around the house and blah blah blah. But you turn 14. I had a job, saved some money. It's time to get a little bit independent. I said, I'm going to get a drum set. Okay, and so I set it up in the garage and I started practicing stuff. And the year later, I was playing like in clubs and beer joints with. I always played with older guys for some reason. They had to be older. I mean, to get in the club, you had to be. And I looked young too. I mean, I was young. And so I met Freddie by the time I was 16, Sly's brother, and we had a group for about a year called Freddie and the Stone Souls.
Uh-huh.
And then, Sly had made it a few attempts at putting the group together. It wasn't working out. And so he was going to make this was a planned effort. He had, okay, I'm going to get that person and get that person and so on and so forth. And literally the day that we started the group, I didn't know um, I showed up at the house for a rehearsal for Freddie and I, for that group. And when I walked in, Freddie and Sly were in the kitchen, and they were having something to eat. I said, well, where are the guys? Where's everybody? They go, well, we can start a new group today, Are you in? And I said, okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
It was just like really, they were messing with me. And but of course I was in, and that's the day everyone showed up, and where, I described it, we all kind of looked at each other, and this is going to be, it's going to be interesting. And Sly had a high profile at that point already, in as
Sure.
far as he had a radio show, great
Right.
radio show. It was
Did
just,
you listen to him? What was
oh,
it?
are you kidding?
KSOL. KSOL.
KSOL and KDIA was the other one.
Right.
Two R&B soul stations, they were called back then. And he had a very creative radio show. He would even do stuff like, sing he had a piano in the studio, and he would sing the commercials or the weather.
The weather.
Or even
That's
sometimes the news, Yeah, it was very, very cool. And he was just a colorful, bright, uplifting, played great music, great show. If you could, YouTube search some of it, if there's any clips.
Yeah. In fact, I have a record here that I showed to Jerry and Larry. It's not this, this is a compilation of some of the music that Sly made and some of his radio broadcasts,
Right.
From just before you all got together. And it's interesting, some of the material he was doing. There's some jazz on here. There's some Otis, and there's some James Brown on here. But what's funny is it doesn't sound like the Family Stone at all.
Well, if you listen to like some of the first demos, I mean, it was quite. The beginnings were. You could see where it began until what it morphed into, what it was going to be, how it developed, and really started focusing in musically, song wise, lyrics, the content of what it's all about. I mean, I guess it was by the third album, which is what back then the big labels, record companies would bet 3 out. If they really signed you and they were really going to back you, they figured the third album. And if you didn't get a home run by then you
that
went.
was it.
You know what I mean? But it was difficult. I mean, they didn't know what to do with us back then, how to market the group. And it was very different. It looked different. It was represented different things. The music was there. Everything was different about it.
This is so interesting to me, because I asked Larry and Jerry about, that first year around Whole New Thing. And I assumed that you all, would have played at the Fillmore in the Bay Area, like right out of the gate. And I think it was Larry that made the point that Bill Graham thought Sly and the Family Stone was too weird. He said the word was too weird.
Did they tell you the Rich Romanello story? Rich was our first manager. And we were playing down his club in Redwood City. It was called the Winchester Cathedral.
The Winchester Cathedral, okay.
Yeah, after hours, before hours, and after hours, we did shows there. Anyway, he, about 6 months into it, we started to get a roll going, and the group was starting to, it had an image, it had music. We could go do a show anywhere, even at that time. And he pitched it to Bill, and Bill goes, what do you tell him? My audience, they're not a dance. They don't want to dance. And Rich looked at him and says, what? Are you kidding? Of course they do. They want to listen. This group, you could dance, you could listen, you could whatever. I mean, in the Fillmore, this was early days of the Fillmore. I mean, later on, Bill really opened up and really brought in Miles with Quicksilver and the Grateful Dead. What I mean? He really got into it. But early on, he passed on it. And then a year later, as Rich puts it, R.I.P. Rich, he passed away a couple of years ago. Great fella. A year later, Rich says he paid dearly for them because it went back and forth, you know.
You played the Fillmore in New York before the Fillmore in San Francisco. Is that right? Do I have that right? That was what Jerry said, if he's remembering correctly.
It could be. That's actually could be because we moved back to New York and we were playing around the corner from the Fillmore's place called the Electric Circus.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had, you know, so in between, I guess, passing on us and seeing what this was turning into is, oh, yeah, I got to have the group, you know. And I got a, I got a picture someone sent me online of a ticket of that weekend. And the ticket read, Jimi Hendrix Experience, Sly and the Family Stone, Eric Burdon and the Animals, either $6 or $7.
Yeah, ain't that something? Ain't that that's some
Those are
bang
the
for your
days,
buck.
man.
Greg, what was the music when you're practicing in the garage, okay, before the group, before you're playing out? What was the music that you were playing, studying? Was it jazz? Was it soul? Was it rock and roll? What were you into?
Well, like I told you, I, you know, only started 3 years before. And I used to like music. I used to like good music. I would listen to everything, literally, you know, stuff from Cuba, jazz. Buddy Rich was one of my first inspirations.
Mm-hmm.
Jazz big band. I love, you know, Cuban salsa, R&B, gospel, rock and roll. I listened to everything. I really, so I had, you know, and being growing up in San Francisco, which is an international intersection, I was fortunate enough to, you know, that be my history, and you're exposed to everything, music from all over the place. So, you know, it wasn't like I grew up isolated somewhere in the Midwest or, you know, where you don't, it'd be unusual to hear these type of things. And so that played in well with what we were about to do because the group really embraced a lot of different kinds of music. It infused together. It wasn't a fusion band, but it wasn't just, you know, a soul band or R&B band or blues or rock and roll. There was a lot of those elements, which, you know, you're a musician, you know, in the music. And we did it not by the book. We did it totally by the heart, and just where something felt good, we embraced it. We brought it home. Yeah, that's what it was all about. You know.
I mean, you're telling the same tale that Jerry and Larry tell in terms of when I asked them, you know, what their musical tastes were and what their musical ambitions were.
Mm-hmm.
They basically say, you know, we were a blank slate. We just liked good music. It seems to me, all these generations later, that this was a really special moment
Mm-hmm.
in cultural history,
Mm-hmm.
because here we sit today where we have a genre name for everything,
Right.
and there's a station, a radio station, and a channel for every subset category. But there's such a purity in the music of Sly and the Family Stone. It's like I hesitate to call it a melting pot. It's more like a salad bowl because all of you brought so much to the table,
Yeah.
and yet it created a very simple, soulful, resonant, magical music that we all still relate to today. I find it so interesting that, and I wonder if you feel that there was some element of with the integration of the group, black and white men and women at that time, 1966, 67. Do you feel like that may have played a factor in Bill Graham's hesitation, or you know, how much did the fact that it was an integrated group, how much was that discussed, you know?
No, I don't think, you know, the the ingredient of the group, I think, absolutely played a part into what it represented, what it became. But I don't think, because there were, black and white and male and female in the group, that Bill made the decision to pass. This was 60, say mid 67, and he had just started doing these things within a couple of years. He had the Longshoremen's Hall, he had, and so, and these were all the experimental groups that were coming out of San Francisco, but mostly it was, psychedelic rock, folk, he didn't get sophisticated with his bookings and started bringing, he brought, let's face it, he brought indigenous blues music to the young kids and
Sure.
took them out of the Chitlin circuit
Yeah.
touring, and it made them household names and jazz artists and all, so he really went there in a big way. I think this was just bad timing, and
Sure.
he wasn't right. He wasn't taking the challenge of, well, what do I do with that? Where he went, I think, later on, I believe. He'd see something that might have been challenging music, and if we're saying something, he would take it on and make it happen, create something. It was just before that he got into that, with his mindset and his approach to, his promoting shows and all that. That's what I think.
Did you have any issues with being underage at any point? The early days?
None whatsoever. They'd sneak me into the bars and stuff that, first year and a half or whatever. And it never was a place, it was never a thing where we didn't play there, because no, they would make it work, we'd make it work. It was not a big deal.
How did your family feel about you playing in the band and then this sort of meteoric, or, certainly after 2 years, you guys were everywhere? How did they feel about it?
Oh, at first it was, the same stuff, or, they wanted me to be this or that, do other things. But I was clearly very passionate about playing drums and music. And things happened so quick that they didn't even know what was going on before it was already happening. And so, but I got to say, just this funny thing, my father worked in restaurants. All the big restaurants in San Francisco downtown, and so he probably didn't at first talk about me. Oh, I think my son's playing drums, he's playing music somewhere. Probably kind of glimpsed over it. But so go up 2 years, I guess 68, early 68, we did the Ed Sullivan Show. And I remember coming back one weekend after that, and he was working at this very famous place, and I went there with my girlfriend, and they come out and take an order and all that. I had ordered a Caesar salad, where they wheel the big thing out when you're doing a Caesar
Yeah.
salad, and do it at your table, and really fancy. And I remember the chef came out, and the owner came out, and they all came out. Oh yeah, Slanted Families. Oh yeah, Ed Sullivan Show. Yada yada yada. And it was like that quantified the whole thing. But I mean, sometimes that could take a lifetime to happen. Things move so exponentially quickly. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Let me put this on silent. In those days, things move quick.
It's hard to explain to younger generations what the impact of doing the Ed Sullivan Show would have been at that time.
Uh,
Can you, of all the things that you were doing in those first couple of years, do you think that was the most impactful, just sort of professionally?
When I talk about this, I talk about it in terms, you got to put it in perspective. Now we have, and geez, you go back to younger people, even a couple of generations, and still they don't understand that there was 3 networks no computers, no internet, no video games, nothing else to access media. There's one or two newspapers. There were 3 TV networks, and when you did on Sunday evening at prime time, 8 p.m., a national TV show,
Everybody saw
it
it.
changed. The world's seen it. I mean, it changed. The next day, your life was different. You
Yeah.
know, and it was a very powerful thing. And this was like, speaking of Ed, so this is the place I had seen Elvis Presley for the first time in 55, I think it was. No, yeah, 55.
Sure.
And the Beatles in 65, And so it was a powerful show. And if you connected with people in any kind of way, doing that was, that just carved your path. It opened the door. And now you could go in and really take it to the next level.
Sure.
You know?
Talk about for a second about the musical chemistry playing with Larry Graham. I've asked him to describe what it was like playing with you, and both in the studio and live. And it was just amazing to hear him talk about, uh, you know, what a unique musician he feels that you are, and how all of you just brought a kind of unprejudiced, open musical spirit into the room. And songs could start with a beat from you, or it could start from a bass line from Larry, or a keys part, or a guitar part from Freddie. Talk about that chemistry though, and how quickly it developed between you guys.
The chemistry was definitely there from day one in a powerful way. And like you described, it was, there were no, it was just open and it was face value every day. We never had to talk about what we were going to do, what we were doing. Matter of fact, we didn't even start, we realized sometime into the development of the music and the group and everything that how unique it was and how powerful the chemistry was. And um and even and even after that, you know human beings could find a way to start fixing it when it ain't broke. And we never challenged it. We felt we were very, we're all pretty passionate about our performances and our playing, and we took it pretty seriously. So, when something was presented to you or when you're trying to develop something, we got deep into it, and it had to connect with us. And there were obviously, I think everyone had the capability of knowing what that bar is, how high that bar was. And
Sure.
you want each thing you were going to do, it's going to be at least there or better, even to the point where, uh, when you start recording, you're making records and they come out and you start being lucky enough or fortunate enough, whatever, to they're on the radio and people are starting to hear, your records. And, we went from playing clubs to, larger, auditoriums to big concerts. And in doing so, it wasn't just going and playing that record. Certain songs, and you could play verbatim like you recorded it, and there were others that it didn't work, or even going
Right.
to the different levels of performance.
Yeah.
You had to learn a different chop to get that song over
Live. Yeah. Absolutely.
live. Whole different thing, and everybody, took it upon themselves to do that at each juncture naturally. So I mean, the group was really, this chemistry in the group was really special, and we really had a thing that I think we all felt and realized and nurtured it for as long as we could.
Let's talk about dance to music for a second, because it's obviously in the trajectory of the group, the song that commercially catapulted the name Sly and the Family Stone. I mean, there was so much amazing music happening in the Bay Area at that time,
Yeah.
but not a ton of it crossed over you know, in a pop way, the way that this song did, and so many other subsequent releases.
Mhm.
Um, do you feel like Sly had a drive, or sort of strategic drive to put a song together that would do that, or was it more organic than that?
No, he had a conscious drive to achieve that. First of all, you got to remember early on, he's he's on the air. He's a DJ, so he knew that world, and he and the some of the people that were his partners were actually program directors and owners of the pop stations, the big pop station that it was KYA. It was Tom Donahue who started the FM format, the AOR format, and Bobby Mitchell, I think, was a program director. And these were big wigs in that. And this was a big network. When you got your record on one of those stations, you just picked up 75, 80, 100 stations across the nation. So that was powerful. You know, you can't buy that. Well, there's argument to that back then and all that, but you know, it's a powerful thing. So he was conscious of all that power and that visibility that you could achieve if you this, if you that, you know, if you did certain things. And so I think that was always in his he was always striving for that. And you could even listen to the material, how actually Dance to Music was a conscious effort that he took on when Dave Kaperlik, our manager, and who was VP of Epic Records, come to him, because we put out the first couple records, especially the first one. It went over everybody's heads. That's same music, by the way, like A Whole New Thing, the first album. That really represented the young Sly and Family Stone and what we was all had in
Yeah,
body, all the energy and all the diversity and all the things, but it wasn't commercial,
right.
you know. And the record company didn't know what the heck to do with it. Columbia Records, very powerful label, and they have the resources to really do it, but they had no clue. And you know, there was nothing wrong in that really. That same record, by the way, now a lot of those tunes on there and pieces, drum breaks and
Yep.
tunes, and, you know, have been sampled
To death. Yeah.
thousands,
And will continue
thousands
to
of
be. Yeah.
times and made hit records for rappers and hip hop artists along the way, 80s and 90s and 2000s. Uh, so who knows, you know, but you know, there was always this element of you guys are, you know, a little bit you're ahead of yourselves, you know, you're ahead of everyone. You got to, and actually when David Kaperlik with this line, he says, you gotta, we need a song that a single that everybody could relate to. You got to get something. It's got to be a subject uh, that you get everybody's attention and everybody could relate to it, and you they become part of your family for a minute. And then once you got that, then you could go talk to them, say what you want, you know, you get, but first slow down so they could get on your shirt coattail and ride, right? And so he did it, you know, he achieved it, and he kept thinking of these elements along the way. I mean, I remember talking to him. We were in New York at that time, staying back there. We're living back there, and we were talking about what those elements are. And I remember him saying, you know, we'll do a dance tune. Everybody could dance. Everybody relates to dancing.
Yeah.
And then in that dance tune, he featured everyone, put, you know, there's a beat you could follow. There's voices that are unique and represent everything that was happening in the group. And there's horn lines and, you know, and it worked.
Greg, would you be willing, look, say no if the answer is no. Would you be willing to go behind the kit for a second and talk for a second about that song just from a drum
Yes, it
perspective?
was.
Yeah.
You know, I lost the big, yeah, okay. Let me see if I get the big screen, but for some, I got just a little, uh, what, I did something that, hang on a second.
You can shrink me. I don't care.
No. I want to be able to see. This all there is just a little postage stamp on the top of my Mac on screen. I lost the big screen and I don't know where it went. And let me get that again. And then, yes. Oh, here it is. Okay, got it. Now,
Yeah, so like I am a piano player and a singer. I listen to drums differently and talk about drums differently than you would. But to me, it's, the thing that's so special about your playing on Dance to the Music, to me, it has elements of something that somebody like Clyde Stubblefield would have done with James Brown, that sort of controlled dance. There's like a lid on it. There's a
yeah,
lid on it,
yeah, it's a pulse.
but you're giving it like such a kick in the ass,
Yeah.
It's that, but it's something new. Can you show it to us?
Yeah, okay, and there's an element of like when we first started, we weren't like seasoned studio musicians back then. We're just, Sly and Freddie had done a lot of recording sessions like with Ray Charles and so on and so forth, Billy Preston, and they used to fly down to LA, but I was just coming into it. But I had my style, and I remember the engineer coming out to hearing us at the Electric Circus there in New York before we started recording. So he would understand. He said, well, you got to come and hear this group because this is a little bit different, you know what I mean? And so, and I remember as far as recording techniques, we came in from a whole nother place than what these guys, the engineers, were used to. And, but instead of them saying, well, look, you got to put tape on your drums and you got to play a little lighter, because I used to pound, right? They figured out, okay, we're going to capture that sound because there's something there.
The way you do it, as it is.
We know they were feeling it. They didn't know what to do yet, but they hung in there. We worked together and created the sound. So I used to pound. I don't know. Dance to the Music.
Yeah. All we need is a drummer. For those who only need a beat, yeah.
Is it distorting?
Yes. Walk me through it.
It's all right?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't. Sometimes that can be a little weird if it's distorting.
We fixed it after you first sent.
Okay. Yeah. Turn it down.
Yeah. And just so you know, you're not alone. Like I said, Larry, you're not getting out of here until you do that thing. And he was like, oh, with pleasure. I'm gonna somebody home. He must. I said, you must have sung it 20 times just this week.
Well, he's got that deep voice. It's just natural. He's yeah.
I like just hearing him talk. Woo.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Woodstock for a second. I mean, they say if you were there and you remember it, you weren't really there. But I know that you remember it. I've heard you talk about it, and it was a landmark in American music. And in my opinion, you guys just stole the show, certainly on that day. What do you remember about having to wait until 3 or 3:30 in the morning to play?
That was the hardest part. I mean, we were supposed to go on, I think it was 8 p.m. on Saturday evening. And Michael Lang kept coming back and, putting us off another hour or two. Sorry, guys, everything's running behind. So, forget Woodstock and 500,000 people. Just doing a big show, just doing a concert, you get your adrenaline, you're anticipating, you're working up, just like going to play a basketball game or football game, whatever, and so that adrenaline rush and that preparation in your mind and your spirit to go bring it. And oh, you gotta wait, And this happened 4 or 5 times till it was 3 in the morning when we finally went on. And at that time, then that presents an additional challenge of reality, meaning 8 p.m. was nice. The crowd was prime, ready for, they're ready. You could feel it, oh, this is going to be great.
Mhm.
By 3 a.m., first of all, it had been raining. So you're realizing that it's raining. Everyone's tired. They've been there since Thursday, daytime, nighttime, sleep up, beat up, loud music the whole time, and they're just done. They're asleep. It's cold. It's raining. Everyone's in their tents. They're bunkered down, and you got to go on and do your show.
Yeah.
Wow. And there's half a million. We this is a new vibe. This is a new experience. This was a challenge to begin with, and and this is what the group always did in any kind of a challenging situation was just at the end of the day, we just kind of like all like looked at each other and said, all we could do is go out there and bring our thing, do what we do, and do it the best we can. And that's all you could do. Forget everything else. So it worked.
As a drummer, when you're playing for hundreds of thousands of people in instead of hundreds or maybe 1,500 to a couple thousand at the Fillmore or something,
Yeah.
how does the gig change to make hundreds of thousands of people groove to your beat? How do you approach that differently?
Well, the way I played, fortunately, fit into that template or that mindset, meaning I used to, I think, back then there wasn't, the PA systems and the production was nowhere near the level it is today,
Right.
from monitor systems to the house system. So, we all had like, I had like 4 Leslies. Larry, I think, had 4 big dual Showmans for sound. I had 2 dual Showmans with a Shure mic that I used to put right underneath the snare drum, between the snare and the bass drum. And they were in back of me. So, and then I was pounding too. I mean, I was delivering it. And because you had to, I was always impressed when I seen someone show where the drummer was really solid, not just, not just they were solid, they were deliver, you got to deliver it. This guy, all of a sudden the color appears, there's a sound, there's a thing that connects, and the hair goes up on your arms, and you go, okay, yeah, you start moving. um so as far as this unique situation, being 500,000 people, this is all new for everybody, the audience, the groups, everybody. It's a new experience. So you, at the end of the day, again, you apply what you do, whether there's 5 people or 500,000. It's like we always had that kind of mindset that even when we played at a little club and nobody showed up, and in the early days, we still gave it our all.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing to, like anybody that does, whether you're an artist, or you're a painter, a sculptor, or whatever, and you're into what you're doing, that's what you're going to do.
Did you feel any kind of kinship or connection with some of the other drummers? Like I feel like your rhythm section at Sly and the Family Stone was much more groove and dance oriented than the Who and Jimmy and all these other bands where the drummers were kind of wilding out more.
Well, no, I just, again, just did what I did. And I believe we all had respect for each other. I know I've always felt respected from all these drummers, all the artists that we used to, do shows with, including Hendrix, The Who, BB King, you name it. And so it wasn't like, and especially back in those days, all the groups that came out of San Francisco, and we all had we all had our place, a unique thing, and it was like,
Yeah.
and no one really tried to sound like someone else. Everyone
Right.
did their own thing and stuck with it. You know,
Sure.
I got a thing called the stick people right now, with a capital S and a capital P, no space, stick people. And it's 5 drummers from that musical renaissance that we're talking about, of the late 60s or early 70s, that was happening in San Francisco. Um, David Garibaldi from Tower,
Yeah.
Lenny White from Miles Davis, Michael Shreve from Santana, and Mike Clark from Herbie Hancock.
Oh, that's heavy. That's a heavy group.
And we're doing this sort of thing, and we've got some things we're putting together, and we talk about that. That was the initial point, and the initial realization of us coming together, and we had the realization that all these bands and this music that we represent had that element. We all had our thing. We didn't sound like each other. We didn't try to sound like. We all respected each other, and that's what was happening. That's what the atmosphere in San Francisco back then. It was just amazing. I mean, it was, and that's when it came into its own, was that time period. There was always a lot of creative music around San Francisco, but that's not where the music was coming from that you heard. It was all out
Right.
of LA and New York.
Yeah, no, that was the moment.
Yeah.
I spoke a couple weeks ago on this show. I spoke to Denise Kaufman from the Ace of Cups,
Oh yeah.
and she talked about opening for Jimi Hendrix on the back of a flatbed truck before anybody knew Jimmy in the park, And we talked about this very thing, about how from 64, 65, 66, she had been playing, and she saw, all of a sudden, all eyes were on San Francisco and Creedence Clearwater and the Grateful Dead and Janis, and it was Sly and the Family Stone. It was like one of those magic moments in like Paris in the 20s or 30s, like New York City in the 70s with music, with San Francisco in that couple years.
It was just amazing. Yeah, it really was. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I remember. So I made the comment that, so the music business and where most of the stuff was coming from was Los Angeles, New York. And so during this time, again, it got to be where the labels would, if you were from San Francisco, you just get signed, but they didn't understand it. I mean, when I say they, I meant the labels. And they even had tried to set up satellite offices up here, I remember, and they would put, but it still wasn't being run and administered from San Francisco, no matter how big the inertia got. If the creativity was coming out of here, but the business was still in LA,
Sure.
New York, and so on. And they didn't really understand it. And I could understand why they didn't understand it, because it didn't follow any templates that existed,
Yeah.
or even ones that maybe you couldn't. You either had to just be here and you got into it and you were part of it, or you weren't.
Sure.
It was kind of like that.
I know that you all, you spent a lot of time together. When you're in a band, any band, you spend a lot of time together, but that was a special moment in history where I mean, you all were kind of a true band. Everybody brought something to the table. Could you talk for a second about that, the phrase "family stone"? There was this idea that got put out into the world that you were all a family, and I've even been reading and seeing things where there were press releases that were suggesting that you were all related, right? And did you all coordinate clothes together? Like, what was the dynamic in the beginning? Let's put it that way.
As far as clothes, it wasn't so much that, like you've seen most of the groups from that time, or just before that time, were like, everybody would wear the same suit, the same
Yeah,
tie or the same something.
sure.
We always had the, Sly really encouraged individuality, meaning that we were going to be colorful and colorful and make a clothing statements. So there were some pretty funny ones at first too, but it got cool after that. But it represented, individual and colorful and just stepping out. So like music is just an explosion, a burst of colors and good feelings. And
Sure.
so it was all to represent that and uplifting and positive, music.
Sure. I mean,
Thoughts.
you know, the band Sly and the Family Stone, more than any other group, I think the word positivity certainly it surrounds the music of Sly and the Family Stone, and each record made like a quantum leap forward musically, style, it just the formula, whatever that formula was or wasn't, it changed. It constantly changed.
Mhm.
But by the time you get to just before around your departure from the group, when you guys get into There's a Riot Going On record, this is a record that consistently gets voted one of the greatest albums of all time. Now there are many, Stand gets the greatest hits are always in those lists of the greatest albums of all time, but There's a Riot Going On really continues to grow in stature, and it's obviously the darkest Family Stone record.
Right.
If you can put aside for a second whatever the complications of making this record and whatever the other factors were, just musically, what do you think of this album now when you hear it?
It's, definitely what you just suggested, that there was a departure from what the Family Stone typically represented, and that uplifting thing was darker. And as far as challenge to making it, it wasn't that there was really a challenge to making it. Is what happened is the group was splintering. I had left just before that, and some of those tracks that I am on were recorded the year before and canned. In other words, they weren't finished. We didn't finish them. So Sly had a lot of pressure from the label, for one, to doing a record, and everyone was leaving. So hence he got the drum machine and started creating so he could write with that. And he actually developed a unique thing with the drum machine to make that part of the sound. And it was a really corny thing, actually, but the way he used it in a creative, unorthodox way, outside of what it was intended for, to create a sound. It was unique. And so a lot of the things he did himself, he started playing the guitar and, the group still contributed on a lot of this stuff, but a lot of it he did himself too. But it was more like independent. Instead of us going in the studio as a whole band, we cut tracks and then we'd open vocals and horns and all that. Yeah. And so that's where that came from. So there's a lot of, first of all, a lot of people are listening by this time. Okay.
Sure.
And this became and this new sound, this darker thing. But Sly was really as deep and passionate as he gets about stuff. It reflects that, and it reflects what was going on, some of what's going on at that time.
I'm not clear on, and I saw conflicting credits, what songs on here that you're actually on.
Africa, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Africa. There's a couple of them. If you want me to stay. No.
Did you ever have to play with the drum machine, or was that always on the other tracks?
No, that was after. This is when he introduced it. All the tracks before, all the music before, We didn't use a click or, I mean, there was no drum. There wasn't even a drum machine. There was metronomes,
Yeah.
but it was interesting. I think this might be an interesting thing, is that on all the singles, not the album cuts, but all the singles of all the music up until that time period, I would go in after the song would develop and morph into what it's going to be, compared to when we originally cut the track. I go in and do the drums as the last thing before mixing. So I'm doing the drums. So I really got to focus in on, the verses, the chorus, the intro, whatever the song had unique to offer, and really focus it and really lock it down. And I would just put it on, like I said, there was no click tracks or anything. So I put cans on and just, put the meter would be there. I mean, everybody was very capable of keeping good meter in this group. So, and I'd create a new performance, and then they would mix it. And so all those singles were created like that. But we cut the tracks all together, it wasn't piecemeal one by one. We did it all together. And the songs would develop depending on what song, like Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again, for instance. I remember Sly talking. We got 10 versions of that, and one has nothing to do with the other. You would never recognize this version of it. That's that song, because we're experimenting and trying different things. But I remember Sly really had a very strong feeling about what he was hearing on that. And after we cut the track, I remember he says, "Hey, I'll be gone for about 2 weeks. I'm going in the studio, and I gotta get this. It's here, but I gotta get it, And he goes, when I do come out, you're gonna say, it's like this. I promise you, this is gonna be cool." And sure enough,
Larry
it was.
Graham said that your beat on Thank You was just so unique, and he felt like that was such a reason as to why that was a hit, and that he hadn't heard that was its own beat. He hadn't heard that beat before.
Yeah, well, it was like we used to play. There would be times where we would be shadowing each other. In other words, they would play the same riff with the bass drum and the bass. And there's other times where we would be, for lack of a better term, contrapuntal or in harmony.
Yeah.
Like I would play here and here and here, and we would play opposite me, or where I'm not, or I
Right.
would play where he wasn't.
Sure.
Whatever was, and it wasn't just that thought. Well, if you're playing on this beat, I'm not going to play there. No, it was a total feel consideration and what made this figure be the best that it could be. Just really work and say something.
Yeah.
And we always had that in mind, on our minds to achieve. So you're listening for it. You're changing it. It's sometimes it's what you don't play.
Yeah.
Don't play there. That space is what makes it happen.
Sure.
Spaces between the beats. Yeah.
Greg, after your time with Sly and the Family Stone, you've gone on to do so many incredible things and been involved in so many amazing projects. Weather Report, David Bowie, Quicksilver, Santana. You've played with Larry Graham and his other project. I wanted to ask you, because I'm a huge fan of the Diamond Dogs era of Bowie. The fact,
they just had a celebration of his birthday, a concert.
Yeah.
About 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
So give me a comparison. You played with two kind of musical genius band leaders, creative, many, but just between playing with Bowie during that Diamond Dogs era and your time with Sly, is there anything that they had in common? I'm always trying to figure out what these creative geniuses, these band leaders have in common.
Well, if anything, to take the ones who were most closer in common, or like, the genius of this person and that person would be, definitely Bowie to Sly, Jerry Garcia, and that was in the Garcia band in his own way, but much different. Or Joe Zawinul, Weather Report, much different. All very different. But probably those three in as far as musical intention and intensity and achieving levels, energy levels
Sure.
above the norm, those kind of things. And personalities too. Probably Bowie and Sly and Bowie personality more so.
Do you think you feel like Bowie and Sly both in a very special way could sort of see the whole picture, like the musical, the visual, the
Yeah,
how it would affect people, in all
yeah,
different ways?
I think so. Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't that Jerry Garcia didn't see how musical. I mean, he was,
Sure.
but in a much different, again, for lack of a better term, maybe in a simpler way.
Hmm.
It just where Sly was in a, you know, in a very deep way. Sometimes where it goes deep beyond, well, who's going to understand that? Only
Sure.
you understand that. But what you're doing, you're so passionate about what you're doing that they'll understand, like the plate it's delivered on, but they don't understand where it's growing,
Right.
where this stuff's coming from, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's, I mean, and musical diversity, musical achievement from whoever, the Beatles. I mean, their songs. I mean, when you listen to any of these people describing what you heard the song and it means something to you, what it was saying to you, and it could be different to a lot of different people. But where it actually came from, I would have never guessed that. I would have never,
Sure.
yeah. And it doesn't matter. Again, it's just that it connects and it moves you, connects, or you could relate to it on some level in your own experience.
So, Greg, you've been very generous with your time. This is such an amazing project for us because um, there are, there are, Sly and the Family Stone was just such a special moment and in some ways a brief moment. And you were involved in such an amazing, integral part of this project. And you were very young at the time, very young. Uh, and I'm just wondering how it feels for you now, having been so many decades into a musical career, to listen back to what you did when you were so young. How does it make you feel when you hear the songs on the radio? Do you critique yourself, or do you just feel the joy that you felt back then?
But probably more, it's just gets back down to simply feeling the joy because it was there then. There was a time, uh, again, when I said in like the 80s and like we're kind of fell out of grace and the catalog kind of disappeared. And, you know, I, I felt removed from it then. And then when you
I
find
see.
out how something you were part of creating has touched so many people in so many different ways that it's uplifting. Uh, I don't know if that just simply opens the door, or if it's just like a certain time period we go through as human beings where things flow in and out of your presence. I'm not sure which one, but I could definitely say at this time, I'll put on one of our records and I'll be digging it, whether I'm playing it or not, and
Yeah.
full joy in it once more.
Well, listen, I just want to thank you for your great work um, with Sly and Family Stone and all the music that you've made over these years. It really is special. And it's just such an honor to get to chat with you. It's been very interesting talking to Larry, Jerry, and you. And now I'm going to go on and talk to the others. And it's just amazing because I interview a lot of musicians. It's amazing to see this very special kind of air of joy and kinship that you seem to all have, even as everybody goes in their own directions and their
Yeah,
different paths. It really seems like there was a lot of love at that time
yeah,
that continues to this day.
yeah, yeah. There absolutely is. And let me just say, it's my pleasure talking to you. I'm honored to share some of the stories and some of the feelings I have about it. And give Fawn a call and ask her to be at her father's house when you
Yeah.
talk.
We're gonna work on it.
I know he'll come on. You gotta come on.
We're gonna try. And so many people, when we announced this and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame announced that we were working on this project, you know, it's a zillion people. They just want to see Sly. Everybody loves Sly,
Yeah.
and he's still with us. God
Yeah.
bless him. And I think we all just want him to know how deeply his music is still loved. You know?
Yeah. The last picture I seen, may I say, of him, he's got, once again, a cool sparkle in his eye.
Yeah.
You got to see it.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Greg Errico, you're a bad man on the drums. Thank you for your great work. Keep in touch, and I hope to see you in person uh, at a gig sometime when we can do that again.
I
So
hope so.
keep playing, my pal. Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thank you.